had a good week, I hope. And sorry, no Christmas songs today, but next time we meet, Stephanie, let's throw a couple of Christmas songs in there for sure. So I'm really grateful for Jack's prayer this morning, because sometimes we just have to remind ourselves that, you know, God is with us, and, you know, in that capacity, it's unlimited what we can do. And so recently, when I joined this church, it was on Thanksgiving Day in 1976, and that was November 25th. So this last Thanksgiving also was on November 25th. 45 years. 45 years. Amazing. And so it caused me to take some time to reflect about my life in the church. And in our church, there are two paths you can go by. I bet John Pace can tell us what that's from.
But there's still time to change the road you're on.
That's right. Stairway to Heaven. Stairway to Heaven. And in our church, there's the path which goes through the seminary, and there's the path which goes through business, right? In our church, we have kind of two paths you can go by. And Father, I don't know if he was delineating that, but we also have two paths that we can go when we're young missionaries in the church, which is we go on the fundraising track, and then we go on the witnessing track. So even though fundraising has a spiritual component, it's more external because we're restoring money or material things. And the witnessing track is more internal because we're restoring people. And in my case, I had started on the fundraising track in 1977, and I stayed there for 10 years until 1987-ish. And so I'm sure that Father's intention was, you know, all of us become spiritual people, religious leaders. But he sent us on two very distinct tracks, even though we didn't always adhere to that. So I went the fundraising path for a long time, and then at the end of that time, I had the opportunity to go to seminary. And there was, when I reflect about my life in the church, what a difference if I had gone to seminary. A very different life, I think. I don't know, good or better or worse, but different. And there were several factors that I was thinking about at that time. This is after 10 years on fundraising teams, or on fundraising mission. So I went to Barrytown, not Tarrytown, Barrytown. And I spent a day strolling around the campus, which is beautiful. And I can imagine myself studying there for is it a 2-year degree, a 4-year, 2 years? I could imagine it happening, but there was a couple of factors that I was also thinking about at that time. And one was, when I got there, I went into the office and they said, Father recommended you for seminary. Father recommended you for seminary. But then someone, kind of behind the scenes, said, well, kind of. What they do is the office makes a list of eligible members who they could come to the seminary, and then they send it to Father, and Father signs his name on it. So Father maybe didn't recommend me personally, but he signed the list with my name on it. And there was one other thing that I was considering at that time, and that was, I think I was 32 and my wife was about the same age. And my MFT leader said, well, if you go to seminary, you're not going to be able to start a family right away. You're going to have to wait. And so you might want to keep that in mind because you guys are getting up there in age. And so I was on the seminary grounds. I tried to pray with an open mind. keep, to allow God to guide me. And in the end, I felt like I just don't feel called to be a minister. I was gravitating toward the business track in a way. And so in the end, I said, no, I don't think I want to go to seminary right now. And so instead of that, I went to work in the MFT office, and my wife and I started family at that time, and we lived in the New Yorker Hotel. And that was in like February of the year, and a little later in the year, like August, Father had a meeting in East Garden, and he called American-Japanese couples to come to the meeting. And he said, I'm sending you guys out to work in Japanese restaurants.
And what year is this now?
87, 88.
88.
88. So, and then we were assigned a restaurant in Atlanta, Georgia, I think because that was closest to my hometown. At that time, there were no Japanese restaurants in North Carolina, for example. So, one thing I can remember about being on the fundraising teams is that we never went to church. We never visited the local church at all. We had a prayer service in the morning in the van, and we had a pledge service on Sundays, but we never went to church, and except for like God's Day or something, maybe a holy day, a few times a year. And I remember something similar when we joined the restaurant business. Restaurant members never go to church. I think the exception that I can think of is Ron Takahashi. He was, he used to have a Japanese restaurant in Cary, and he always went to church. But that was
When you say church, you mean our church?
Right,
Oh,
local church.
local church.
So when I was in Atlanta, or I moved around when I was in different Japanese restaurants. I was in Nashville, Tennessee, in Atlanta, and Huntsville. The members never went to church because they worked 55, 60 hours a week. So Sunday was a day off for them. They went fishing or something. And they went to church on God's Day. But otherwise, we didn't go to church very much. Well, actually, as it turns out, that's not that different than my life growing up, because my dad was not a very religious person. He grew up in the Methodist church, but I mean, grew up means he was born. His family went to the Methodist church, but at a certain age, he rejected that. But my mother was, she was religious in her way, and she was a Catholic. So there was a compromise. We used to go to church every other Sunday. That's what we did. We went to church every other Sunday. So
To the Catholic or the Methodist? Which one?
we went to the Methodist church.
Okay.
So my father had more influence. But my mother had a say. She did have a say. And my father never knew his dad. He never knew his father. His father actually died before he was born.
Wow.
When he was 21, my grandfather died. So he never knew his father, but my grandmother remarried, so my grandfather was not biologically connected to me. We called him Papa King, but he was great. I mean, I love both my grandparents, and my grandmother and Papa King had a second son, would have been my father's half-brother. And he was religious. He was a Christian. He went to church. He sang in the choir. He was deeply religious. So one day, when I was out on the fundraising teams, my Uncle Bobby, came up to visit me, and he took me out to eat. And we were having a discussion about churches, and I said something critical about the Methodist church. At that time, I was young in the church. I was probably 4 or 5 years in the church, and I was self-righteous. I was arrogant in my faith. And I said, I don't remember what I said, but something like, the Methodist Methodist Church isn't anti-communist enough, or something like that. And he said, well, I love my church. So, and we all do, right? We all love our church. So he said, I love my church. And I never forgot that. I mean, I regretted it for a very long time. So a couple weeks ago, we had a prayer breakfast in Charlotte. And so I went to Charlotte, and my uncle lives in Rock Hill. So I attended the prayer breakfast, and then afterwards, you know.
Sorry, so that was your uncle that said that to you?
Yeah.
Okay, so now your uncle's in Rock Hill.
Rock Hill.
So you're seeing him again, all right.
Right. Sorry, did I say my grandfather?
I thought maybe you
So my uncle's in Rock Hill, so I arranged to go meet him for lunch after the prayer breakfast. And I showed up at his door, and I'm wearing a tie and suit. He said, I didn't know it was formal. But he, he chose an Italian restaurant, and we went and we had lunch together. And it seemed like he didn't want it to ever end. We just sat there for 2 hours, just talking. Mostly I was listening, but he just talked a lot. And then we drove back to his house, and we sat in the driveway, and we talked some more. And he shared with me some very intimate details about when his wife, my Aunt Betty, passed. And he shared some intimate details from when my grandfather, Papa King, passed. And I knew by that he trusted me to share intimate details. And you know, young people really don't like to talk about death, but when you get old, you realize what a rite of passage it is. Such an important moment in someone's life. So in my Aunt Betty's case, Uncle Bobby was on the computer late one night, and he heard some commotion. He was on the computer late at night, and he didn't want to wake up my aunt, his wife, so he went and slept in the guest room. And then late at night, he heard some commotion, and he went in, and Aunt Betty was sitting up in bed, and she said, I can't feel my legs. So it was a heart, something to do with her heart. So they took her to the hospital, and the next day, he went to check on her, and he was shocked. She was on a ventilator, and he said to the doctor, well, did you read on her chart where it says not to intubate? And he said, it pains me to say this, but she wouldn't want to be like that. So they took her off the ventilator. She died shortly after. And he was pained by it, but he did it out of his love, out of a deep love. And he shared that with me, very matter of fact. He said, this is what happened. And I was really appreciative to hear that story. And then he told me about his father, Papa King. So Papa King's case, he was in the hospital, and the doctor said, he's dying. He's not going to live too long. So all the family came, and there were 10 or 12 people in the room. And Papa King wasn't saying anything, but they would talk to him, like Uncle Bob said, you want to go play golf this afternoon? And he would smile. And the nurse said to Uncle Bob, yeah, sometimes it happens like this, when the family's there and they don't want to pass. And so later that evening, people started to go back to home or back to work, whatever they had to do. And finally it was just Uncle Bobby and Aunt Betty and their oldest daughter, their youngest daughter, Nancy. And he died. And Uncle Bob said that nurse was right. So what I felt was relief, because there was a tension that existed. And I wasn't even sure if he'd go to lunch with me at all. But he went to lunch with me, and we cleared the air. We had a very deep experience I was just so grateful for that.
Why was there tension?
Because I criticized, well, one reason is because I criticized his church.
And he held on to that, or?
Bob
I
held
thought
on to it.
I thought he might. Yeah, I thought he might.
Did you apologize for it? At the dinner? Like say, it's been on my mind, I've always thought about this.
Oh, you mean recently?
Yeah.
That was a long time ago, John. I mean, I don't know if I apologized at the time. I hope I did.
No, did you apologize?
Recently.
Yeah, when you had dinner, when you had lunch with
Was
them.
it part of the
Was
conversation?
it part of the
I
conversation?
didn't bring it up. No.
Oh, why not?
Because I felt it's in the past.
Oh, okay.
I mean, you may be right. Maybe I should have brought it up. Like I said, he did most of the talking. I did a lot of listening.
But in a way, it looks like he didn't remember it that way.
It didn't seem like
He
he held
didn't
it against
remember it
you,
the way you did.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's good.
Awesome. Anyway, what's in the past is in the past. That's how I think. But anyway, we all love our church, don't we? And I realize how much I love my church is that it's Sunday morning and you know exactly where I'm going to be. I'm going to be right here because we have a great church and we love our church and we are among the people who share our faith and it's really a wonderful thing. It reminds me how great this church is, even though it's got political issues and whatever, but it's really a beautiful church and it's worth fighting for. So let us close in prayer. Dearest Heavenly Parent, we just thank you so much that we can be here this morning. We thank you for every good thing that we've inherited from our life of faith, for the blessing of knowing that there is always hope. That hope comes from you, but it exists inside of each one of us. The hope does not exist in this world of woe, but the hope exists in us, and we really pray that we can touch that hope, express that hope, bring that hope to the people around us, and share what we have with others. And we ask this in the name of the Blessed Central Families, Jude. Okay.